Hi, and welcome back to Zo Talks. This is a show all about mental health. We focus on adolescents, the education industry, and the mental health industry. This is also the show where we discuss all things difficult. What are some of the burning questions on your mind that you want to talk about?
I'm Christina. I'm from Zoala. We're a generative AI tech startup company.
And I'm Joina. I'm from WID, a youth counseling center.
And today we have two special guests, Dr. Shamili Roy, who's actually our Zoala CTO, Chief Technology Officer, as well as a very cool guest from the mental health industry, Dr. Jared Ng. And I'm gonna head over to my notes because there's a lot to remember. A little bit about him. He's been a psychiatrist for more than 20 years, and he's served in the Singapore Armed Forces as a military psychiatrist. But since then, he has opened up his own private practice. But before this period, he served at IMH, and so he oversaw child and adolescent inpatient services. He served as a program director at a community mental health program and a crisis response program, and he was a founding chief of the Department of Emergency and Crisis Care. So suffice to say, he has
Very accomplished.
Yeah.
Well, bow down.
Yes, yeah, and he's like the subject expert when it comes to suicide and suicide prevention. Yeah, so what brings them here today? The tech, which is Dr. Shamili Roy, as well as the mental health, psychiatrist being Dr. Jared. Together, they wrote a piece around chatbots. So if chatbot in the mental health industry can prevent suicides, and just recently it got published. It's
In
Straight Times.
So it was a huge one-page article.
It was very cool. You can find it digitally as well as in the newspaper as a print. So that was very cool. And so we thought, let's dive into that. We invited them. They have busy schedules, so we're really thankful that they were able to speak with us for this podcast. I think without further ado, we can jump right in.
Hope you guys enjoy.
Dr. Jared, I think this is the first time our viewers are seeing you. Would you like to introduce a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm a psychiatrist. I've been working in the mental health field for more than 20 years. I've always been in the public sector, but about 6 months ago, I left to set up a clinic of my own. Prior to leaving the hospital, I founded the Department of Emergency and Crisis Care, which really looks at a lot of patients in psychiatric crisis, and that includes suicide. So yeah, I'll be happy to see how I can contribute to your chat show.
Thank you, Dr. Jared,
Nice.
for joining us today.
One thing I'm actually curious about after I read the article is in regards to suicide detection and prevention. What are some of the gaps that you find in the system, and how do you think that AI and chatbots could help to close some of these gaps?
Yeah, so I think this is almost like the holy grail of suicide prevention, right? Is there a way that we could detect suicidality even before it happens? I think research have shown us, I don't think the article said too much about it because of the word limit, but research has shown us that there is this element of impulsivity to suicide. Many studies across the world have shown that the time it takes between a person having a thought about wanting to take their life and actually the attempt, 90% of them is less than 8 hours. And in fact, one study suggested that about 1/4 of the persons with suicidal thoughts, that time frame that we have is just 5 minutes. So there is this huge component of impulsivity when a person wants to take their life. But when we talk to people who survive their suicide attempt, they will always sort of tell us that there's some warning signs that could be picked up on. The problem is that it is really difficult. And imagine we only have that little window of opportunity to pick up on something. So that is where I always thought that AI would be really, really helpful, because not only could AI is available 24/7. If a person is chatting with the device, with the bot, it could always pick up some of the keywords. On the other hand, AI can also remember things from a long time ago. I mean, as a psychiatrist, our memories are limited. Sometimes patient could tell us something significant 2-3 sessions ago, we might not even remember. And sometimes patient may mention something in passing 1 year ago during the appointment, and we may not recall it, but the machine remembers, you see. And the machine then can use that as as one of the symptoms, and it can piece things together. And that might help us to detect whether a patient is at risk or not. I wouldn't go so far to say that the AI would be able to tell us 100% whether a person is going to take their life in the next 5 to 10 minutes. But certainly, I think it can be a fantastic warning system telling us that something is going to go wrong, and then the human being should do something about it.
Nice.
Dr. Jared, do you mind me asking, do you know if this is currently in use?
There has been some, I think I read some articles, they are trying to explore doing this, but I think it hasn't really, couldn't fly because of a lot of privacy concerns. So you can imagine if a person needs to allow all the data, all the personal information to be on their device or on the app for this really to be effective. I attended a meeting not too long ago, and they suggested that they could use machine learning to detect whether a person is having relapses of their bipolar disorder. I thought it's fascinating because one of the things which the researchers spoke about was that if a person start to call people that they have not spoken to for a long time, and they call them at odd hours at night, if they do a lot more online shopping, buying things they don't really need, all these could be symptoms that the person is escalating into the manic phase. But you can imagine on the flip side, how much do you need to allow the machine to have access to everything, your social media, your phone logs, your spending patterns? So I'm not sure whether that is something which could be implemented on a large scale at this point in time. Yeah.
Okay. Actually, when you mentioned about privacy, I'm also quite curious because in counseling, privacy is something that we hold to a very high standard.
That's right.
And I'm just curious, how would like AI and these apps, they would hold the data in a secure place, especially in these moments where perhaps like something was alerted and you know, like they need to alert human authorities, right? They need to get in touch with someone. How would that look like for AI and chats?
Yeah, so I think this is also the part that needs a lot of discussion. Should we then have sort of a council to agree how the escalation pathway is going to be? Or should the person is the one to indicate who to inform if there's an increased risk? I think that could be the case when a person signs on with the chat app. We could indicate as part of the safety plan that if we detect that the risk is high, who would you like us to contact? And then the person actually indicated. I think that helps us as well. On the other hand, I think we also can set in some parameters to sort of indicate what could be considered as imminent suicide risk. And this is when we need to probably activate the police. Certainly, this will need their agreement as well. But as what I told many of my trainees and students last time, it's always good to err on the side of caution when it comes to preventing a suicide. Yeah, I've got a lot of stories of how people say, "Oh, I called the police, and now my friend don't want to friend me anymore because she was so embarrassed," and things like this. But on the flip side, what would your response be if you didn't call the police and the person were to kill themselves? Would that be good enough a reason for you not to call the police because you're scared that your friend doesn't want to be your friend anymore? So I think at the end of the day, we have to decide what it takes to save a life. We have to make that call. That is not easy. That's definitely not going to be the whims and fancy of one person. It probably needs a committee or a board to decide what are the threshold to cross before we notify somebody. Yeah.
And maybe that's something that I've come across and things that I've read. Maybe you guys can tell me whether how true this is. But more often than not, when someone does have that suicidal thought, immediately it's not about I want to die, but it's about you know, there's certain things that they cannot overcome, or there's a lot of certain pressures that so in that moment it's not that they do want to die. And if yeah, there's, you know, that safety plan, there's people or certain actions that they would want to take to be able to build that safety net around them to be able to get through that state. So more often than not, they would. But obviously in that moment, they don't have that clarity to be able to do this. Whereas if it's on an app or via an AI, they have that safety plan in place. It gets activated, and they're like, great, this is a safety net that I put into place to remind myself that, or help activate the people around me or that support to get me through that. Yeah. Do you think that would be an effective way of use of AI and mental health?
Yeah, I think so. I think what you say is really quite true, that a person may not take their life because they want to die per se, but many of them do share that view that there's no better alternative. So they could be faced with a stressor, a trigger. And the problem with these stressors and triggers is that, of course, we know that there's chronic stress like unemployment, financial issue, but there is also stress and triggers that could be random, that could be totally unpredictable. I remember knowing of a case, a patient who was really coping very well. The condition is under control, but suddenly got a phone call from overseas saying that both parents have perished in a car accident. So it's totally random, and no one could predict that happening. The parents were going to New Zealand on a really nice holiday, and no one could predict that to happen. And that was a big trigger for him to develop suicidal thoughts, you see. So that having said, we can never do safety planning when we're in crisis. It always has to be done when we are not in crisis. And therefore, like you said, if a person have got a safety plan, we could always utilize it, what is written on the safety plan, and then activate it. I think that would be important. And the crucial thing is there's no just one safety plan that is fixed in time. Safety plans are dynamic. The person you want to contact, the person that you could turn to, the things that stresses you out, changes all the time. And I think having a machine always remind the person, giving opportunities for the person to change their safety plan, I do think it's a little bit more reliable than relying on a mental health professional who may not have the time or may not have their own cognitive ability to remember, okay, it's time to redo your safety plan. So using the machine, I suppose it does give some leeway for the patient themselves or the person themselves to actually be proactive in their own mental health care, which I think is really, really important.
Okay. Then I have a question actually for both of you. If right now we're using, everyone is using, it seems to be trying to take advantage of the tech and using AI in whatever work they're doing at school, at their professions. What are some of the challenges that you guys have seen or have personally faced when trying to use AI or all these chats in your work?
I think let's also bring the same question back to the discussion, right? For example, mental health, like what are some of the challenges which we feel, AI can actually pose. So some of the things that Dr. Jared already mentioned, meaning, the privacy concern, sometimes it is, things can go wrong at crisis situation. There are certain times when you can't predict. So there are situations when we tend to sensationalize things, right? Like one wrong step, and then, all over the media, we are saying that, AI made this happen. So I think solving the problem at hand, like solving the mental health challenge problem using AI is only part of the picture. The other part of the picture is also to gain that acceptance and, teaching the people that things cannot be 100% predicted. Even without AI, it can't be. So having that acceptance that AI is not like 100% foolproof technology, but give it a shot because it can actually save. Like, even if we have false alarms, at least there are alarms instead of having no alarms. So there are challenges, technology-wise, there are challenges, policy-wise, there are challenges, acceptance-wise. So I think having that collaboration, as Dr. Jarrett was also mentioning, right, there's no one person fits all. So we have to bring together everybody to solve this whole challenge.
Yeah, I think so. I think we've spoken a lot about data privacy, about security, because all these are very sensitive information. And I think if there is any instances where privacy is breached, security is breached, then people will not trust this anymore. and then something which could have possibly been very useful will just get relegated to something forgotten until many years later we forget about the lessons, right? I think the other thing which my view is that human emotions are really very complex, and at this point in time, those of us who use chatbot before, when we try to enter certain things, we know that they can't really understand human emotions or human mental state yet. I think one example which we gave in the article in Straits Time was that sometimes a person could suddenly be very, very positive. A person could suddenly feels very calm, be at peace. But to a psychiatrist, this could actually represent that the person has made peace with their decision to take their life. Even though I mentioned earlier that majority of suicide, maybe half of suicides are impulsive, there is still going to be a big group of people who plan their suicide, who plan when to take their life 1 month, 1 year, a few years in advance. When certain milestones are hit, a person may be chatting in a more positive tone, doesn't mean that the risk has reduced. In fact, it could mean that the risk has increased. And that makes deciphering all this really, really very complex. And finally, probably I alluded to it later, is about when should human beings intervene, or when should AI calls for a human being to intervene? I think this is not very clear yet, because you also don't want the police to be activated all the time.
Yes.
And then it's going to be very, very alarming for the family suddenly to have the police knocking at their door. Yeah. I remember I had a patient who was she used to cut herself really, really frequently. And one day she decided that she will not do this anymore. She decided to post something along the line that this is the last time, I won't do it again. Somehow the friend took it as she wanted to end her life, and this is the last time she did a post. She called the police. Police came, and this happened at the time before suicide was decriminalized, and she was arrested. And she was brought to the police station, and that traumatized her, and a lot of the treatment progress that we have made went back several steps that night. So I think we have to be very clear, when should AI intervene? And finally, we learned a lot over the recent years about the effect of isolation on a person's suicide risk, loneliness and isolation. And it will be really weird if we drive people to chat with a robot only, and we don't have human beings to human beings interaction. So I do think that if we ever come up with a chatbot or a machine that could support a person's mental health, it should be just one part of the treatment. It cannot be the only treatment, and it is something prescribed to an individual for them to use, but it should be part of it, either as a warning system, either as a resource communicator for the person, or teaching the person certain coping mechanisms, life skills, for example, rather than just one pill to treat everything. Then I think that would turn around and bite us quite badly.
I think and also from the Zoala side of things, where between Shimley and I completely agree with that, and that's also what we're trying to achieve at Zoala as well. It's not just about the AI and the chatbot. It's also bridging the gap between digital and offline and online and offline, and making sure there's still that human touch, because we recognize that is very important. Okay, so I suppose I have a question. In what ways can AI and chatbots be effective tools in reducing stigma associated with suicide and mental health issues?
I mean, I think one of the important thing is that it increases accessibility. It is always accessible. You can log on 24 hours a day. Whereas if you think about it, in Singapore, if you want to see a psychiatrist or you want to see a mental health physician at night, you only have one option. You have to go to the Institute of Mental Health Emergency Services, where people, unfortunately, there is still some stigma associated with it. It was the department that I worked in. So I think having an AI where a person can get 24/7 support will be really, really helpful. I think the anonymity, as much as I don't think it's always a good thing, but being able to be anonymous when you chat with an AI may encourage people to seek help without fear that they'll be judged. And I suppose people may feel less strongly that it is a machine they're talking to rather than a human being. I think people will think that machine doesn't judge them. So maybe that helps them to really open up and share some of the things that they have that's bothering them. Yeah.
Having the access is one thing, but AI at the same time can also collect signals, right? And based on the kind of conversation which is happening, AI can do that bridge between online and offline. For example, recommending some counselors if the AI thinks that that is the need of the hour, or just recommending things like, it seems you are stressed, just go for a walk, or just find a friend, go for a movie, things like that. And all these kind of recommendations can be auto-generated based on the situation. But again, this is like a chicken and egg problem in the sense that people have to start using the AI. If they use the AI, they follow the suggestion, AI learns that these suggestions are useful. And then it can generate better suggestions. But if, for example, there's just one-way communication and we are not getting any feedback in the sense, are whatever responses coming from AI really useful? Or is it actually helping you calm down or making you feel a little bit better at the end of the conversation? If we can get those kind of signals, then we can make AI even respond better. So it's not only about the response at that time, but also the recommendations, which are not necessarily online. And if we can collect feedback, we can get better continuously.
It sounds very similar to even a person seeing a counselor. It takes time and that connection between a counselor. So even if it's not so effective the first time or the second time, giving it time or changing to a different counselor and yeah. So similar to chatting to an AI, something like this, even with a human, takes time for that connection to build, or finding the right person for you.
Actually, following about how, like, the more you use AI, the more it can adapt to, the person's needs or understand the person a bit better. Last year, some NTU professors actually looked at having chatbots to support mental health, and it's been a year. I'm just curious if either of you have seen any differences since then, within the chat use or within the receptiveness to using AI for mental health.
Shamini, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think the technology has also evolved. Like traditionally, how chatbots would work is you will define the conversation flows. And it will be like a very predefined chatbot, meaning if I express sadness, the response will be limited within few responses, probably, guided by some kind of a positive psychology thing, but it will always be following a pattern, a fixed pattern, which is not as personalized as now, given that generative AI is here. So with generative AI, we don't have to rely on finding the intent of the user and figuring out the predefined answer every time a user chats. Now with generative AI, the AI is not rule-based anymore. Like, it just responds based on your personality, your question. So the answers are more natural, and we are able to control the answers much better if we can feed from psychology practices. Like if we have, for example, answers or let's say scripts or, ideal conversations from the gurus of psychology practices, for example, it's much easier for us to actually ingest all of this data and make the AI more personalized and more attuned towards, the latest practices, as opposed to before, which would require you a long process of gathering data, training the models, and then releasing and then safeguarding with rules. Now it's much more faster and it's much more easier to do the personalization. That's from the technology side of things.
Yeah, I suppose with that, with more data, then I think the ability to predict and predict accurately will also increase. I think that's important. Yeah, I haven't seen the NTU chat bots yet, so I better not comment in case I misquote them or say something wrong. But I do think that what's important is for any tools to be user-friendly, to appeal to different age groups. I do think that it is quite different. And whether there's opportunities to integrate all these AI tools with healthcare services. Because we also know that not everyone with mental health needs will go to a mental health professional. Many of them will seek primary care. Many of them may even go to emergency services as well. So is there a way to integrate all these tools, not just with traditional mental health services, but also with non-mental health services? Something that we can look forward to.
So maybe this is a question for Dr. Shamili. What would Zoala, or even for Dr. Jared actually, for Dr. Jared, what would Zoala need to continue journeying down this path?
Yeah, I think technology is just part of the picture, I guess. For Zoala or other technology companies to actually bring in these kind of solutions, we need to very tightly work with the professionals, right? The subject matter experts, for example, in this case, Dr. Jared, right? Which is why we work very closely with him, because subject matter experts actually give us the domain knowledge, which is very, very important for us to actually make it more efficient, make it more practical and useful for the community. So that's one part. The other part is also being able to work closely with policymakers so that at least we can show the potential of the technology and hopefully influence policy making in such a way that all three parties can work together and make this a practical solution which can be mass adopted. Those are my thoughts, and maybe let Dr. Jared also express like what he thinks companies like us should do in order to make any difference in this field.
I think the tech company should always be at the forefront of AI advancement. I'm not sure what that would entail. That's certainly not in my domain, but I think being at the cutting edge of technology will be important. Of course, we've spoken a lot about ethical and privacy concerns during this, so ensuring that we always stick to it. But I think user feedback will be very crucial though. I think getting feedback from the youth, from even their parents, I think that would be really helpful to see what is needed for the app to be widespread and be used quite frequently. Because we could have the best app, the best technology. If it's not user-friendly, no one is going to use it, and we end up not being able to reach out to people who can truly help. I think we should continue to work not just with healthcare professionals, of course, with psychologists, counselors, psychiatrists, tech expert, but perhaps you could even get feedback from individuals who might support groups, for example, people who have lost their children or their family members to suicide. I think they will give really good feedback to this as well. We always have to think about them because they have been affected personally by suicide, and perhaps their voice will be very important as well to help us develop the app further or to push for the app to be used. I think this is important.
I think that's great feedback. We should probably reach out and gather feedback from the community who are actually going through this phase.
Yeah, no, that's a really good. That's a really good call out. And I suppose for any of our viewers that are seeing this, we're actually always inviting user groups and focus groups to give us feedback. And so if you'll be interested, if you're a student or a youth yourself or a parent yourself, reach out to us and join our beta programs, as we're always looking at feedback, improvement, and working closely with those focus groups for sure.
Okay, so maybe I have just one more question to end off this. I'm just wondering, in your guys' opinion, how would tech act as the bridge between individuals and the mental health care specialists?
Maybe I'll start from the mental health specialist part. Even if we don't include AI apps like Zoala, I think there's already been sort of a lot of telepsychiatry and teletherapy kind of platform. I think that allows people to get help when it is not convenient for them to visit an actual clinic. We have done this for patients who are not very mobile. We have done this for patients who cannot avail time to leave their busy workplace, and yet they don't want their employer to know that they are seeing a psychiatrist. So I actually see some patients during their lunchtime via the telehealth app. I think that's useful. I think the other way that tech can act as a bridge is through apps, through AI-powered chatbots, which is what Zoala has been championing, trying to do. And I think the other thing which tech can do, which I think is very useful, would be having online support groups. and platform for people where they can hear stories of recovery from others. And I think a lot of people with certain disorders like anxiety disorders that may have a lot of difficulties leaving their house and meeting people, suddenly having all these online groups provide a lot of support for them. The other thing which I think tech might be useful is all the wearables, all the technology. Perhaps one day we could do something with mental health as well. But right now we could already track sleep, activity, heart rate, blood oxygen level. We could track all these things already. So one day perhaps we could track something that could help us develop an algorithm to look at a person's mental health condition. I think those are things which are going to be useful. And certainly for suicide prevention, having the ability to do predictive analytics, I think will be crucial. That through what people say, the life events that they are going through, their history, their medical history or social history that they put onto the app, I think we could analyze this data and give us a sense of the risk of the suicide risk. And I think that would be really, really helpful because then we can intervene early. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this multidimensional correlation is something that is really powerful, and with AI we can scale it to do it across like thousands and millions of users, right? Because not a lot of people have access, and doing it via speaking is harder because you still have to get access to somebody who is a therapist or counselor, and reaching that person, be it online or physically, creates a barrier. But what AI can do is do it continuously 24/7, and then do it across data, which is spanning like months and years. And if something is happening to me, AI can actually correlate with another person. The same thing might have happened with a similar personality and what was the outcome. And then being able to predict that, oh, in a similar situation, a similar person did this. So the propensity of this person going through the same thing is this percentage. And giving that analysis to somebody like a professional will really help, fast track things a lot and see through a lot of noise and filter out the more critical ones. So yeah, predicting, correlating multiple dimensions, big data are all critical technologies that can help.
That is incredibly cool. Something that I mean, Shamili, I've worked with you for a while, and yeah, so we never chatted about that, but yeah, that's incredible. That I never considered those kind of opportunities there. So I should have mentioned both we have Dr. Jared and Dr. Shamili, but actually different kinds of doctors. Dr. Jared being a medical doctor, and Dr. Shamili being a PhD holder in AI. So yeah, it's really, really awesome to see this combination of tech and the mental health field.
So thank you guys for checking out this special episode with Dr. Jared and Dr. Sharmili. We hope that the conversation has, helped you gain some insights more about tech and the mental health field and how the two can actually help each other out. Feel free to leave us any comments or questions that you guys have. We would love to have you in this open conversation and dialogue about how to improve the mental health field.
Dr. Jared, thank you so much. You're overseas, and we know you're incredibly busy. So thank you so much for joining in.
No, I'm not.
This.
No, I'm just waiting for my dinner reservations. Yeah.
But thank you so much, both to you and Shamili, and so for those of you guys, we will be putting in the description below the link to the Straits Time article. Do check out about more about chat AI and how it can help prevent suicide. Thank you to you both. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.